Episode 19. Tensions explode when Gennaro drags Nieves into a room after she saw him kissing Chiara. He brutally beats her while keeping Chiara locked outside. Hearing Nieves's desperate screams, Chiara pounds on the door, begging Gennaro to stop. When he finally comes out, she furiously confronts him over his cruelty. Gennaro coldly claims he only attacked Nieves to make sure she never reveals what she witnessed. Disgusted by his actions, Chiara orders him to let go of her and storms away. Meanwhile, Luis visits Prudencio's house to ask Adelaide what really happened during her outing with Mercedes. Adelaide tells him everything about Hermina and her friends humiliating them at the park. She explains that they also dragged both his and Domenica's names through the mud, accusing Luis of attacking Gabriel because of Domenica and blaming Domenica for Pedro's release after his fight with Osvaldo. The next morning, Luis and San Genis sit near the cliffs discussing the agreement with Domenica. Luis admits that his mother refuses to support it because she has always hated the ranch. He explains that years ago his father was unfaithful to Mercedes, leaving her unable to separate the property from the painful memories of that betrayal. San lightens the mood with a few jokes, making Luis laugh despite everything. Back at the house, Adelaide serves Pedro a badly burnt breakfast. When Pedro notices she is in a bad mood, she reluctantly admits that Nieves visited him the previous day wearing makeup and trying to impress him. Teasing her, Pedro jokingly asks if she is jealous. Adelaide immediately denies it and sarcastically tells him to go eat whatever Nieves has prepared instead. Smiling, Pedro pretends to agree, leaving Adelaide even more annoyed. Elsewhere, Nicole finds Nieves quietly crying in the kitchen. She gently asks if Pedro rejected her after she dressed up for him, but Nieves insists she is fine before quickly walking away, desperately hiding the bruises Gennaro left on her body. Meanwhile, Mercedes continues teaching Pedro how to read. During the lesson, she tells him about her argument with Luis and Domenica's land agreement, explaining that she refuses to sign the documents. Pedro immediately sides with Mercedes, promising to support whatever decision she believes is best for the ranch. On the mountain, Luis and San discuss meeting the jeweler to continue investigating the mysterious diamond ring and uncover the truth about the people responsible for harming Luis's sister-in-law and the death of his late son. At the same time, at La Abandonada, everyone gathers to say goodbye to Pilar. Gennaro loads her luggage into the car while Nicole gives her a basket filled with ready-made food. Andres promises they will continue their computer lessons. Domenica embraces her warmly, and Chiara also says goodbye. However, Chiara decides she will not move into Pilar's new house with her. Back at Luis's estate, Pedro confronts Luis and San after learning about the agreement with Domenica. Standing firmly beside Mercedes, he refuses to sign the documents. Despite San trying to stop him, Pedro walks away, leaving Luis to quietly accept his decision. While Adelaide prepares lunch with Mercedes, she tells her that she informed Luis about the insults they suffered at the park and noticed how concerned he became. She also asks permission to visit the carpenter, which Mercedes gladly grants. Meanwhile, Chiara invites Mercedes to Gabriel's shop for a private conversation. Elsewhere, Ernesto helps Pilar settle into her new home. Pilar admits she wishes Chiara had moved in with her, while Ernesto comforts her, saying he believes Chiara will eventually find happiness. Smiling, he quietly adds that perhaps someone even better than Chiara is waiting for him. Luis later visits La Abandonada and speaks with Nicole. She reminds him how devastated Domenica was after Max betrayed and abandoned her, warning that she never wants to see her suffer like that again. Luis sincerely promises that although he is not perfect, he will spend the rest of his life making up for his mistakes, protecting Domenica and never breaking her heart again. Elsewhere, Mercedes visits the future community center with Chiara. Although impressed by the building, she questions whether the townspeople will support it once they discover Domenica owns it. Kiera explains that Domenica deliberately registered the building in Kiera's name so no one would know who the real owner is. She also confesses that she suspects Domenica only gave her the project to keep her away from Luis. Mercedes warns that the truth will eventually come out, especially now that Domenica's reputation has been badly damaged. Kiera decides she will speak with Hermina and make it clear that Luis has nothing to do with her cousin. Meanwhile, Pedro and Gennaro have another explosive confrontation across a fence. The two exchange furious insults until a nearby worker intervenes just in time, preventing Gennaro from reaching for his gun after Pedro walks away. Luis, Domenica and Andres meet to discuss how they might convince Mercedes to sign the agreement. Domenica understands why Mercedes cannot trust her after everything that has happened and offers to speak with her personally. At the same time, Nicole and Prudencio enjoy reminiscing about old memories before Pedro unexpectedly discovers the terrible truth about Nieves. Gently rolling up her sleeve, he sees the bruises covering her arms and immediately realizes Gennaro brutally assaulted her. Filled with rage, Pedro vows that Gennaro will never hurt Nieves again. Determined to make peace, Domenica and Luis visit Mercedes together. Before they can explain anything, Mercedes firmly declares that she will never sign the agreement. Even after hearing them out, she cruelly insults Domenica by calling her the abandoned one. Although visibly hurt, Domenica remains calm and quietly walks away. Furious with his mother's cruelty, Luis follows after her. Consumed by anger, Pedro later sneaks up behind Gennaro, grabs his gun and points it directly at his head. Prudencio and Nicole desperately beg him not to ruin his life by pulling the trigger. Even Gennaro pleads for mercy. After a tense standoff, Pedro lowers the gun, and Nicole immediately embraces him while Andres safely takes the weapon away. Pedro then reveals that Gennaro brutally assaulted Nieves. Nicole turns to Gennaro and warns that the truth will soon come out. Although Gennaro continues denying everything, his growing panic makes it clear he fears being exposed. Later, San confronts Mercedes, warning that her stubborn refusal to compromise could cost her both the land and her son. Meanwhile, Prudencio reminds Pedro that if he had fired the gun, he would have become a murderer. He encourages him never to act on anger alone and asks whether his rage came from what Gennaro did to Nieves or from the years of abuse Pedro himself endured as a child. Pedro admits that the pain of being abandoned by his parents has never truly left him. The episode ends with another emotional twist. Nicole finally confronts Nieves and asks directly whether Gennaro really beat her. Nieves desperately denies it and repeatedly pulls her arm away whenever Nicole reaches for it. Just as Nicole is about to roll up her sleeve and expose the bruises, Kiera walks into the room and quickly interrupts the moment, preventing Nicole from discovering the truth. Episode 20. Maple Leaf. Domenica is left speechless after accidentally overhearing Prudencio reveal to Nicolasa that Pedro is actually Luis Fernando's half-brother, a truth that no one else knows, not even Mercedes. Unable to hide her shock, she steps forward, making her presence known. Still trying to process what she has just heard, Domenica asks Prudencio what he means. Prudencio then calmly recounts the entire story to her, just as he had previously explained it to Nicolasa. Meanwhile, Gabriel is about to leave his shop when Hermina notices him and asks where he is going. Rather than answering her, Gabriel dismisses the question and tells her to get back to work because his whereabouts are none of her concern. His cold response quickly sparks another argument, and he angrily storms off, leaving Hermina standing behind. Still reeling from the revelation, Domenica listens in disbelief as Prudencio finishes explaining everything. Both he and Nicolasa beg her to keep the secret for now and not reveal it to anyone. Wanting to understand how such an incredible discovery came to light, Domenica asks when and how they uncovered the truth. Before Prudencio can continue, Andres calls out for her. She replies that she is coming, but only moments later Andres walks in with Luis Fernando. The atmosphere instantly becomes tense as everyone falls silent and exchanges uneasy glances. Sensing that something is off, Luis asks if everything is all right, but they all simply assure him that nothing is wrong. Maple Leaf elsewhere. Maria is busy serving customers when she notices that her mother is behaving strangely. She walks over to Hermina, who is standing behind the counter, and gently asks if she is all right. Although Hermina insists that everything is fine, Maria can tell something is troubling her. She then asks for permission to visit a friend, and Hermina agrees, reminding her to return before Gabriel comes back. Instead of going to see a friend, Maria secretly follows her father without his knowledge to find out where he is going. To her surprise, Gabriel heads straight to Kiera's new community center. After he knocks on the gate, Ernesto answers the door. Gabriel is clearly surprised to see him there, while Ernesto eyes him suspiciously and demands to know what he wants. Gabriel explains that he has simply come to welcome his new neighbors and make peace, especially since Kiera is friends with his wife. Just then, Kiera walks over from across the road and asks Gabriel why he is there. He repeats the same explanation. Kiera smiles and encourages Ernesto to let him inside, but Ernesto refuses, insisting that Gabriel was only stopping by. Accepting the decision, Gabriel politely says his goodbyes and walks away, unaware that Maria has been secretly watching everything from a distance. Maple Leaf back at La Abandonada, while Nicolasa and Prudencio continue talking in the kitchen, Domenica, Luis Fernando and Andres remain in Domenica's office, trying to find a way to convince Mercedes to sign the agreement. Luis explains that his lawyer has already prepared the contract and that the only obstacle left is persuading his mother to support their plan and sign the documents. Meanwhile, Maria meets Blanca at the park. Noticing that Maria looks deeply upset, Blanca asks what is wrong. Maria confesses that she secretly followed her father after sensing that her mother was unhappy. She explains that Gabriel had dressed smartly, put on cologne, and gone to visit another woman. By the time she finishes telling the story, she is heartbroken and struggling to hold back her emotions. Blanca comforts her as best she can, and later the two of them meet Ernesto at the coffee shop, where they spend some time chatting, laughing and trying to lift Maria's spirits. Elsewhere, Pilar visits Kiera at the community center to discuss their plans for the building. However, what begins as a simple conversation soon turns into yet another disagreement between the two women. Maple Leaf at the same time. Meanwhile, Nieves finishes unpacking her belongings at Kiera's new home and nervously asks if her uncle will be angry that she has left. Kiera reassures her not to worry, promising that she will personally speak to him. Curious, Nieves then asks Kiera if she truly loves her uncle. Rather than answering the question, Kiera gently changes the subject, telling Nieves that she is more than welcome to stay with her and may wear any dress she likes from her wardrobe. Delighted by the generous offer, Nieves happily thanks her. Meanwhile, Domenica informs Gennaro that Kiera has taken Nieves into her home and has also hired her as her personal assistant. Gennaro accepts the news and immediately insists that he never laid a hand on his niece. He claims he has no idea why Pedro would accuse him of such a thing and goes on to explain how Pedro nearly shot him in the head, adding that he only survived because the local officer arrived just in time to intervene. After listening to his account, Domenica simply advises Gennaro to stop being so hostile towards Pedro and the other workers on the estate. Gennaro quietly agrees before leaving. Maple Leaf elsewhere, Mercedes has a brief but meaningful conversation with Prudencio. She admits that she can no longer bear seeing Pedro consumed by resentment and suggests that perhaps they should try to find his biological parents so he can finally overcome the pain of being abandoned. Prudencio immediately becomes uneasy. Before he leaves, Mercedes asks him about his relationship with Nicolasa. He explains that they have known each other for more than 30 years and reveals that they were once engaged to be married. However, after Domenica's parents died, fate forced them to go their separate ways. Nicolasa stayed behind to raise Domenica, while Prudencio had no choice but to move on with his life. Mercedes listens carefully before warning him to be cautious, reminding him that Nicolasa loves Domenica deeply and might go to great lengths to protect her. Prudencio reassures Mercedes that Nicolasa would never do anything harmful. He also promises that, since Mercedes is uncomfortable seeing the two of them together at the estate, he will visit Nicolasa at her home instead of inviting her over. Meanwhile, Nicolasa and Andres are in the kitchen discussing the agreement concerning the ranch. Andres gently asks if she has ever considered rekindling her long-lost romance with Prudencio. Nicolasa smiles but explains that it would never work because Prudencio is now a widower and, besides, she believes he still has feelings for someone else. Maple Leaf later that evening, Gennaro meets with Karalamar in the city to discuss a business proposal. He asks for Karalamar's help in destroying the crop plantation that Luis is preparing to cultivate. Karalamar agrees to the plan, and together they begin plotting how to sabotage the plantation without raising suspicion. Meanwhile, Luis and San meet with Mercedes to inform her that they have officially finalized the agreement with Domenica. Upset that Luis made such an important decision without consulting her, Mercedes accuses him of going behind her back. Luis calmly explains that she left him with no other option. Hoping to resolve the situation, San offers to sell his parents' land so he can use the money to purchase Mercedes' shares himself. After giving it some thought, Mercedes reluctantly agrees, but only because she refuses to let Domenica own any part of her land. Having made her decision, she quietly walks away. Episode 21. Tulip. While Domenica and Luis are enjoying a romantic moment at the lagoon, they share a tender, heartfelt kiss, completely unaware that danger is quietly closing in. At the same time, Gennaro secretly meets with Karalamar once again to discuss selling Domenica a particular product, one that will secretly destroy the entire crop plantation without raising suspicion. Meanwhile, at Gabriel's shop, Chiara gathers everyone together to announce the grand opening of the new community center. Gabriel, Hermina, Cosme and his wife are all present as Chiara excitedly shares the details of the project. Everyone congratulates her and celebrates the achievement, happy that she has started an initiative that will benefit the entire community. During the gathering, Chiara receives a phone call from Gennaro. She excuses herself and steps outside to answer it. As Maria walks past, she overhears Hermina praising Chiara for opening the community center. Mistakenly believing her mother is talking about Domenica, Maria interrupts the conversation, only for Hermina to scold her for listening in on other people's discussions. Embarrassed, Maria quietly walks away. Tulip. Back at the lagoon, Domenica and Luis relax together on the riverbank after their swim, leaning against each other as they admire the beautiful scenery around them. They reflect on how much they have enjoyed spending time together and getting to know one another. Before long, their heartfelt conversation turns romantic once again, and they share another loving kiss. Meanwhile, Andres visits Pilar at her new apartment, where they talk about the fresh chapter their lives have entered. Pilar admits that she finally feels at peace now that she no longer has to worry about Chiara or everything that happened with Luis. She also expresses her happiness at finally having a place she can truly call her own. Elsewhere, Blanca visits Cosme in his office to ask for her job back. Cosme refuses without hesitation, telling her that he will not rehire her because she refuses to follow the dress code he expects. Blanca stands her ground, explaining that she will not wear skirts or any clothing that makes her uncomfortable. She pleads with him, saying she desperately needs the income to help pay for her mother's medical treatment. However, Cosme remains unmoved and tells her that unless she changes her mind, she will not get her job back before ordering her to leave. Tulip. Meanwhile, Chiara meets Gennaro outside the gate of the abandoned house. Gennaro excitedly tells her that they should celebrate because his plan to destroy the plantation has already been set in motion. After chatting for a while, he tries to steal a kiss from her, but Kiera skillfully dodges him before walking away. Elsewhere, Pedro sits down with Elisa and San at the dining table, where they discuss the type of soil and fertilizer that should be used to ensure the crops grow successfully. At the abandoned house, Ernesto and Gennaro are chatting when Luis and Domenica suddenly rush in laughing, cuddling and playfully tickling one another. The moment they realize they have an audience, they quickly stop, slightly embarrassed. Gennaro then tells Domenica that he can no longer handle much of the fieldwork. As the conversation continues, they also realize that Ernesto will soon have to return to the city. Seeing no better option, Domenica appoints Gennaro as the new administrator of the abandoned house. Tulip meanwhile, Mercedes and Pedro sit together in the living room discussing their harvest plans for the next 2 months. Mercedes agrees with Pedro's suggestions. A worker soon arrives to announce that Kiera has come to visit. She enters and warmly greets everyone before Pedro quietly excuses himself, leaving the two women alone to talk. As Domenica and Luis head into the living room, she asks why he seemed uncomfortable when she appointed Gennaro as the new administrator. Once they are seated, Luis asks if she truly trusts Gennaro. Domenica replies that she does because he has always worked hard and faithfully completed every task she assigned to him. She believes he has earned the promotion. Their conversation soon shifts to the crops and the community center that Domenica has funded. She reminds Luis that she previously offered him the opportunity to open a medical practice there. After thinking it over, Luis politely declines, explaining that he would rather leave the idea for the future. Meanwhile, Kiera invites Mercedes to attend the grand opening of the community center. During their conversation, she also mentions that Domenica offered Luis the chance to open a medical practice there. Mercedes immediately misunderstands the situation and assumes that Domenica expects Luis to work for her. The two women continue discussing the matter. Tulip elsewhere, Gennaro and the man he hired to sabotage the plantation travel deep into the fields to retrieve the chemicals he secretly buried. Pulling back the grass that concealed the hiding place, Gennaro reveals several containers hidden beneath the ground. Back at the estate, Andres and Ernesto run into Silva, who warmly greets them. They exchange friendly conversation and catch up on work and old times. Silva jokingly tells Ernesto that he should take her out for ice cream someday. Ernesto laughs, saying he would love to, but first he has work to finish at the community center. After chatting for a while longer, Silva continues on her way. Meanwhile, Maria meets Blanca at the park. Sitting together on a bench, they discuss the difficulties they are facing. Blanca explains that Cosme refused to rehire her because she would not dress the way he demanded. Maria remarks that many of the men in their community have sexist attitudes, pointing to both Gennaro and her own father as examples. The two women sit quietly, discouraged as they wonder what to do next. Elsewhere, San speaks on the phone with the private investigator he hired to uncover the person responsible for scamming Mercedes. After ending the call, he accidentally knocks over a glass of water. He goes into the living room to fetch a cloth and unexpectedly finds Mercedes talking with Prudencio. Feeling slightly awkward, he grabs the cloth and returns to clean up the spill. During their conversation, Mercedes asks Prudencio whether he has made any progress in locating Pedro's biological parents. Prudencio admits that the search has proven far more difficult than expected. Mercedes encourages him not to give up, hoping that finding Pedro's real parents will finally help him let go of the resentment he has carried for so many years. Later, Domenica tells Kiera that she offered Luis the opportunity to work at the community center, but he politely declined. Surprised, Kiera asks why he turned down the offer and wonders if he did so because he wanted to avoid her. She insists that her feelings for Luis are now a thing of the past. Smiling, Domenica says she is relieved to hear that because something special is beginning to grow between her and Luis. As she happily giggles, Kiera watches her for a moment before dampening the mood by warning her to be careful so that her relationship with Luis does not end the same way her relationship with Max did. Hurt by the remark, Domenica asks why Kiera would bring up such painful memories. Realizing she has gone too far, Kiera immediately apologizes before asking whether Domenica has finished reviewing the financial reports for the community center. Domenica replies that she will check them in her office before leaving. Tulip outside, Adelaide patiently helps Pedro learn to read using a children's animal book, carefully teaching him how to pronounce unfamiliar words. While they are studying together, Prudencio walks over and calls Adelaide back inside to continue her work. After she leaves, Pedro asks Prudencio not to punish her. Before Pedro can say anything more, Prudencio firmly warns him to stay away from Adelaide because she is not the right woman for him. Pedro openly admits that he truly loves Adelaide and dreams of marrying her one day before walking away. Later, Pedro finds Adelaide in the kitchen and tells her that he wants to learn to read and write so that Mercedes can one day take him to the city. He also confesses that he dreams of taking Adelaide with him as his wife. Caught off guard, Adelaide reminds him that they are not even engaged. Unsure of what else to do, Pedro suddenly kisses her on the lips. Startled, Adelaide quickly pulls away and tells him not to do that because it reminds her of Osvaldo. Embarrassed, Pedro apologizes before quietly leaving. Meanwhile, everyone gathers in the office to review the financial reports Kiera has prepared. They are delighted to discover that the community center has already received a generous number of donations, giving them hope that the project will have all the resources it needs to succeed. Tulip elsewhere, Prudencio is walking when San catches up with him. As they continue talking, San unknowingly comes dangerously close to uncovering Prudencio's biggest secret. He reveals that he found a photograph of a pregnant woman named Carmen and urges Prudencio to finally tell him the truth. During the conversation, they discuss the fact that Pedro is actually Luis's brother, completely unaware that Luis has overheard every word. Stepping forward in shock, Luis demands to know what they just said and asks how long they have known the truth. After overhearing the conversation, Luis demands answers. Following a moment of hesitation, Prudencio finally reveals the entire truth. Tulip furious, Luis asks why such an important secret was kept from him and everyone else. He also wants to know whether his mother was aware of it. Prudencio admits that Mercedes has no idea that Pedro is the child she rejected years ago. He begs Luis not to reveal the truth, hoping to preserve peace within the family. San apologizes for the way Luis discovered the secret, but Luis insists that he cannot remain silent. He declares that Pedro deserves to know the truth, and so does his mother. With that, Luis storms away, leaving Prudencio and San staring silently at one another. San tries to reassure Prudencio, saying that Luis's anger will eventually subside and that he will find a fair way to help Pedro through the difficult situation. Meanwhile, at his office, Fuensanta angrily confronts Cosme for firing Blanca just one day before the community center's grand opening, especially when they desperately need extra help. Cosme explains that he gave Blanca clear instructions, but she refused to follow them, leaving him with no choice but to dismiss her. Their conversation soon shifts to the opening of the community center, where they smugly discuss the generous donation they managed to secure for the event. Tulip as Mercedes comes downstairs into the living room, she finds Luis waiting for her. She mentions that Kiera stopped by to invite her to the grand opening of the community center and asks him not to be upset that Kiera visited. Before she can continue, Luis suddenly asks whether she remembers Carmen and the child she rejected many years ago. Mercedes freezes in shock and demands to know who told him. Luis explains that he overheard Prudencio and San discussing it. He then asks why she kept such a painful secret from him and why she abandoned an innocent child. Overcome with guilt, Mercedes tearfully apologizes. She explains that she acted out of anger and desperation after her husband's betrayal, believing she was protecting her marriage, but admits she has regretted that decision ever since. Finally, she asks whether Prudencio ever managed to find the child. Luis quietly delivers the life-changing truth: there is no need to keep searching, because Pedro is that child. Episode 22. Small diamond inside her office. Luis explains everything to Domenica and she tries to console him, but in that process of consolation, Luis discovers that she already knew the truth about Pedro all along. Deeply hurt and disappointed, Luis asks why she never told him. Domenica sincerely apologizes, explaining that she believed it was never her place to reveal someone else's secret, no matter how difficult it was to keep. Meanwhile, Mercedes visits Prudencio and confronts him for hiding the truth about Pedro from her for so many years. After explaining why he kept silent, Prudencio unexpectedly confesses that he has loved Mercedes for many years and believes she has always shared those feelings. Just as they are about to kiss, Adelaide unexpectedly walks in, creating an awkward and embarrassing moment. Mercedes quietly leaves, and when Adelaide asks her grandfather what was happening, Prudencio admits that he and Mercedes once loved each other. Small diamond outside, Domenica follows Luis, desperately trying to explain why she never revealed Pedro's true identity. Their emotional argument continues until everyone gathers around to see what is happening. Moments later, Pedro arrives and overhears part of the conversation. After a long and painful silence, Luis finally tells Pedro the entire truth. Shocked beyond words, Pedro pours out years of pain, loneliness and resentment. Although Luis tries to comfort him, Pedro refuses to listen. He tells Luis to stay away from him and asks for time alone before walking away. Back at the abandoned house, everyone gathers in the living room to discuss everything that has happened. Domenica explains that she never intended to keep the secret forever but felt it was not her place to reveal it. Nicolasa supports her, insisting that if anyone should have told Luis and Pedro the truth, it was Prudencio. Silva agrees, and so does Kiera. Kiera remarks that it is heartbreaking to discover that someone you trust can hide such an important secret. Believing the comment is directed at her, Domenica becomes defensive, but Kiera quickly clarifies that she was referring to Mercedes, not her. Small diamond later, Luis returns home, where Mercedes immediately asks whether he managed to find Pedro. Luis tells her that he found him at Domenica's house and reminds her that Domenica should be the last person she is worried about right now. When Mercedes asks how their conversation went, Luis replies that it unfolded exactly as expected. Pedro is furious and chose to walk home alone because he refused to ride back with him. Luis tells Mercedes that when Pedro arrives, she must be the one to explain everything herself. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Domenica confides in Nicolasa, admitting that she fears Luis no longer trusts her because she kept the secret instead of telling him. Nicolasa comforts her, assuring her that once Luis hears her explanation, he will understand. Elsewhere, Luis vents his frustration to San about everyone who kept the truth from him. San explains that no one intended to hurt him and that they genuinely believed the situation would eventually be handled differently. He also urges Luis not to blame Domenica because revealing the secret was never her responsibility. Luis argues that if he had known the truth sooner, he could have handled Pedro's situation far more gently. He asks San not to defend Domenica because the matter is simply too serious. Eventually, San manages to calm him down, and the two reconcile with a heartfelt hug. Small diamond meanwhile, Kiera and Gennaro discuss the shocking revelation. Gennaro can hardly believe that Pedro has discovered he is a member of the Jimenez family. Secretly delighted by the conflict between Luis and Domenica, Kiera hopes the misunderstanding continues to drive them apart. Sitting beside Gennaro, she asks whether he will accompany her to the grand opening of the community center. He happily agrees, saying that if Luis and Domenica are still fighting, he will gladly attend as her date. Smiling to herself, Chiara becomes convinced that Luis will eventually belong to her and encourages Gennaro to keep Domenica distracted so their relationship continues to fall apart. As Pedro walks through the kitchen, Nieves calls him over and asks what happened. Pedro sadly admits that he no longer wants to talk to anyone because he feels betrayed by everyone around him. Nieves patiently comforts him, and Pedro tells her that she is the only person who has always been honest with him and stood faithfully by his side. After he leaves, Adelaide enters and asks Nieves what she wants from Pedro. Nieves simply replies that she only wants to support him. Small Diamond Pedro finally arrives home. As he walks down the hallway, Mercedes calls him into the living room. She shows him an old photograph of his mother while she was pregnant with him. Fighting back tears, Pedro asks whether the woman in the picture is truly his mother, explaining that he had always been told she died giving birth to him. He painfully reflects on growing up believing both his parents had abandoned him. Mercedes sincerely apologizes and tries to explain why she made the decisions she did, but Pedro is simply too heartbroken to hear her out. Meanwhile, Luis and San continue talking. San asks what Luis intends to say to Domenica. Luis replies that he will speak to her the following day. Surprised, San jokingly asks whether this is how he treats his girlfriend. Luis quickly insists that Domenica is not his girlfriend, or at least she has never said she wanted to be. He admits that he no longer knows what they are, except that they have become incredibly close. He almost reveals that they have kissed before catching himself at the last second. Before San can ask any more questions, Olivier requests a video call, changing the subject completely. Small Diamond elsewhere, Nieves and Adelaide argue over Pedro after Adelaide reveals that Pedro kissed her and even asked her to move to the capital with him. Then, Luis and San answer Olivier's video call, during which he presents the latest findings regarding the mysterious diamond ring. He explains that the ring belongs to someone extremely wealthy and originated from a prestigious estate. After sharing several important discoveries, he ends the call. Encouraged by the breakthrough, Luis and San realize they are now one step closer to identifying the ring's true owner. After the call, Luis goes downstairs and finds Pedro arguing with Mercedes. He joins his mother in pleading with Pedro to stay and calmly discuss everything, but Pedro refuses to listen and storms out of the house. Mercedes attempts to follow him, but Luis gently stops her, telling her to let Pedro go for now. As Pedro leaves, he runs into Nieves and Adelaide in the kitchen. They ask where he is going. Pedro tells Nieves that he wants to leave the neighborhood forever. Adelaide begs him not to go, but Pedro simply asks her to thank Prudencio for ruining his life before walking away. Without hesitation, Nieves follows him. Small Diamond Nieves takes Pedro to Chiara's new home, where Chiara warmly welcomes him and asks Nieves to show him to one of the guest rooms. After they leave, Pilar questions Chiara, wondering whether allowing Pedro to stay there is wise considering the tension it could create between Luis and Domenica. Chiara insists that she is only helping Pedro and that it should not become a problem. Later that evening, Nicolasa visits Luis and carefully explains everything that happened, asking him not to remain angry with her. After listening, Luis calms down and forgives her. Meanwhile, back in her office, Domenica finishes a video call with the children at the orphanage. Feeling warm, she loosens the top buttons of her blouse slightly, completely unaware that Gennaro is secretly watching her through the doorway with lustful intentions. He then enters the office under the pretense of offering to help with the work now that Ernesto has returned to the city. Small Diamond While Luis and Nicolasa are still talking, they notice Adelaide and Prudencio walking towards them with their bags packed, ready to leave. Luis and Nicolasa immediately ask where they are going. Prudencio explains that he wants to leave. Before he can continue, Nicolasa takes Adelaide away to help her with something, leaving the two men alone. Prudencio admits that he wants to leave because Pedro will never be able to look at him the same way again after everything that has happened. He says it no longer matters whether Domenica delayed revealing the truth or whether Pedro believed his father had been a saint all these years. Luis silently listens as Prudencio pours out his guilt. Back at the office, Gennaro continues pretending to help Domenica with work on her laptop. Instead of concentrating, however, he cannot stop staring at her with desire. Every time Domenica looks his way, he quickly averts his eyes and pretends to be paying attention, assuring her that she has his full support and that he is willing to help with anything she needs. Small Diamond Prudencio also tells Luis that it pains him to watch Mercedes suffer, especially after confessing his love to her. Shocked, Luis sits down and listens as Prudencio explains everything that happened. Prudencio admits that he does not expect Luis to understand or forgive him but cannot help feeling ashamed of everything he has done. Luis tells him that his feelings for Mercedes are a personal matter, but the most important thing now is finding a way to win Pedro back as his brother. Inside the house, Nicolasa teaches Adelaide embroidery. During their conversation, Adelaide remembers the embroidered towel her grandfather once showed her, explaining that it had been made by the woman he loved. Smiling warmly, Nicolasa admits that she loves him too. By the end of their conversation, Luis and Prudencio finally reach an understanding. Small Diamond meanwhile, at Gabriel's shop, Gabriel carefully arranges a beautiful bouquet of flowers at the center of a table. Herminia walks in, notices the flowers and immediately assumes they are for her, believing Gabriel has finally decided to show her affection after all these years. Delighted, she thanks him, only to have her happiness shattered when Gabriel explains that the flowers are actually for Kiera's community center grand opening. Heartbroken, Herminia quietly sits down and begins to cry. Maria walks in, notices her mother's tears and asks if the flowers were meant for her. Sadly, Herminia explains that Gabriel bought them for the community center instead. Later, Luis visits Mercedes in her room and tells her that Prudencio has decided to remain at the estate while giving Pedro the time and space he needs. After sitting down, Luis says there is something else they need to discuss. He informs Mercedes that the jeweler has finally provided them with a list of steps that could help identify the owner of the mysterious diamond ring. Small Diamond meanwhile, as Nieves leaves her room to return a teacup, she notices Pedro sitting alone, lost in thought. She gently asks if he cannot sleep. Pedro admits that everything that has happened is keeping him awake. Sitting beside him, Nieves comforts him and promises that she will always be there for him. Grateful for her unwavering support, Pedro thanks her. Their emotional conversation leads Nieves to kiss him. Afterwards, Pedro jokingly says they should stop kissing before lightning strikes them. Seeing the disappointment on Nieves' face, he quickly takes back his joke, and the two share another tender kiss. Later that night, the man hired by Gennaro secretly sneaks into the thriving plantation. He pours the hidden chemical into the water tank that will be used to irrigate the crops, quietly setting Gennaro's plan into motion. Small Diamond the following day, Luis, Domenica, the workers and the rest of the team gather at the plantation. Luis and Domenica explain the day's work and promise everyone a good meal once the job is finished. The workers begin watering the crops, completely unaware that the irrigation water has already been contaminated with the dangerous chemical. The next morning, Gabriel's shop is filled with guests dressed for the grand opening of the community center. Nicolasa and Domenica arrive together, chatting as they walk inside. Nicolasa notices the curious stares directed at Domenica, but Domenica brushes them off, saying she only hopes Luis is no longer angry with her. They soon join Gennaro, Kiera and the other guests. Moments later, Luis arrives carrying a beautiful bouquet of flowers. After greeting everyone, he walks straight to Domenica and presents the bouquet as a heartfelt symbol of his love and affection. The romantic gesture immediately upsets both Chiara and Gennaro. Unable to hide her disappointment, Chiara quietly turns away and walks towards the stage. Meanwhile, Luis and Domenica openly embrace their feelings, sharing a passionate kiss in front of the entire crowd. Episode 23. Small Diamond. While Luis and Domenica are sharing a tender and affectionate moment, everyone around them watches with interest. Some of the guests are even left stunned by the obvious chemistry between the pair. Sensing the growing whispers among the crowd, Chiara quickly steps up to the microphone and redirects everyone's attention back to the ceremony. Introducing herself, she warmly welcomes everyone to the grand opening of the community center and, without further delay, officially cuts the ceremonial ribbon, marking the beginning of a new chapter for the project. The crowd erupts into applause and cheers. Chiara also gives special recognition to Gabriel for helping with the decorations and refreshments, while Herminia watches from a distance, unable to hide her jealousy. Once the formal ceremony concludes, Chiara invites everyone to enjoy the refreshments and mingle. As the celebration begins, Domenica quietly tells Luis that it is finally time for her to speak with his mother. Small Diamond. As guests spread out chatting and socializing, Luis and Domenica walk over to Mercedes. Domenica politely greets her, but Mercedes deliberately ignores her and walks away, leaving the couple standing there. Disappointed, Domenica admits that she is genuinely trying to be kind to Mercedes but cannot control how she chooses to respond. Luis comforts her, confessing that he also does not understand his mother's behavior and promising that he will speak with her. Wanting to reassure him, Domenica pushes aside her sadness, tells him she is fine, wraps her arms around him, and the two share another romantic kiss. Later, Chiara approaches Mercedes, who apologizes for Luis's behavior and admits she initially believed the bouquet he brought was meant for Chiara. Chiara tells her not to worry before subtly turning the conversation against Domenica. She warns Mercedes to be careful, suggesting that Domenica might use Pedro's situation as an excuse to grow even closer to Luis. Surprised, Mercedes asks how Chiara knows about everything and wonders if Domenica confided in her. Chiara replies that Domenica only told her part of the story and even spoke negatively about Mercedes. Pretending to sympathize, Chiara assures Mercedes that she completely understands why she acted the way she did years ago. She even says that if she were in Mercedes' position, she too would have struggled to accept raising the child born from her husband's affair. Mercedes agrees, explaining that people fail to understand how impossible that situation was for her. Small Diamond. Meanwhile, at the park near the fountain, Pedro sits alone in tears, holding an old photograph of his mother and pleading for comfort as though she could still hear him. Before long, San arrives and quietly sits beside him. He explains that Adelaide told him Pedro had gone to Domenica's house. Pedro bluntly asks whether San has come to reveal yet another family secret involving Mercedes and Prudencio. San calmly explains that he only discovered the truth after finding a hidden photograph and letter inside some books in the library. He confronted Prudencio because he wanted answers and had intended to tell Pedro himself, but events unfolded too quickly. San hands Pedro the letter, encouraging him to read it because it may help him understand that his father truly loved him. Bitterly, Pedro replies that the only person he has ever trusted was his mother and that everyone else has lied to him. Despite San's pleas to read the letter and return home so they can resolve everything together, Pedro tears the letter into pieces and orders San to leave him alone. Small Diamond. Elsewhere, Luis and Domenica continue enjoying each other's company. Watching from a distance, Gennaro burns with jealousy. Cosme walks over and jokingly teases him about how bothered he looks seeing his boss with the handsome doctor. Gennaro immediately snaps that his feelings are none of Cosme's concern. Cosme continues teasing him, saying people will naturally compare Luis, an educated and respected doctor, with Gennaro, an ordinary laborer. Irritated, Gennaro insists that Luis is not the reason for his anger. Instead, he accuses Cosme of secretly starting another business behind his back. Cosme immediately falls silent. Upstairs, Mercedes and Chiara continue discussing Pedro. Chiara tells Mercedes that Nieves has brought Pedro to stay at her house and that she is giving him a safe place to live. Grateful, Mercedes thanks her and suggests that Pedro be given notebooks and writing materials so he can continue practicing his reading and writing. She also mentions that he enjoys drinking coffee before bedtime. Chiara promises to encourage Pedro to forgive Mercedes and agree to speak with her. Their conversation soon shifts to another topic that immediately unsettles Chiara. Mercedes reveals that she recently reconciled with Luis after he told her they were getting close to identifying the person responsible for murdering his late son. Trying not to panic, Chiara casually asks whether they have any leads. Mercedes explains that the investigation has now reached a jeweler who may be able to identify the owner of the mysterious diamond ring and says she hopes the murderer is caught soon. Alarmed by the revelation, Chiara quietly excuses herself and slips into another room to gather her thoughts. Small Diamond meanwhile, Luis and Domenica continue talking about their future together. Luis admits that he dreams of having children one day, and Domenica happily agrees, saying she loves children and would love to build a family with him. Just as they are about to kiss again, Maria rushes over and apologizes for interrupting, explaining that she urgently needs to speak with Domenica. Luis politely excuses himself, leaving the two women alone. Maria tells Domenica everything that happened to Blanca at work and hopes she can help. Elsewhere, Chiara quietly pulls Silva aside and tells her everything Mercedes revealed about the investigation. She insists they must find a way to get the jeweler on their side before he exposes them. At the same time, Blanca walks past Ernesto, who quickly catches up with her and compliments her appearance. The two chat pleasantly until Cosme arrives and once again tries to humiliate Blanca. Ernesto immediately steps in to defend her, forcing Cosme to back down and leave. Moments later, San rushes over, accidentally bumping Ernesto aside as he also checks on Blanca. Before long, the two men jokingly begin competing over who will eventually win Blanca's heart. Small Diamond elsewhere, Prudencio assigns work to several laborers alongside Bartolo before later finding Pedro and pleading with him to listen. Although Prudencio apologizes repeatedly, Pedro refuses to forgive him. Prudencio also begs Pedro not to blame Mercedes, explaining that she knew nothing about the truth at the time. He even reveals that he only confessed his love to Mercedes recently, proving that she herself had only just learned the full story. Still unwilling to forgive him, Pedro pushes Prudencio's hand away and walks off. Shortly afterwards, Luis thanks Chiara for opening her home to Pedro. He even offers to cover Pedro's expenses, but Chiara politely refuses, saying they are all family and that she is happy to help. Her apparent generosity convinces Luis that she has truly accepted his relationship with Domenica. Later, Blanca meets with Domenica and explains everything Cosme has done. She says even Cosme's own wife recognizes her talent, but Cosme is more interested in politics than treating people fairly. Blanca also reveals that she would love to teach theater classes at the community center if Chiara could provide her with a space. Domenica promises to discuss the idea with Chiara and even offers Ernesto's help if Blanca ever needs assistance. Just then, Chiara and Luis arrive, prompting Blanca to excuse herself. Chiara happily announces that she and Luis have finally made peace, and the three continue chatting together. Small Diamond back at home, Pilar and Andres spend some quiet time together. During their conversation, Andres finally confesses his love for her. However, Pilar gently turns him down, explaining that she only sees him as a dear friend and loves him like a brother. Elsewhere, Nieves struggles with her shoes on the street when Osvaldo approaches and asks how she has been recovering since his attack. Nieves firmly tells him to stay away, making it clear that he will never manipulate her the way he manipulated Adelaide. Osvaldo insists that he has no bad intentions and only wants to get to know her. Just then, Adelaide steps outside and notices them together. The atmosphere immediately becomes awkward. As Adelaide crosses the road, she runs into Pedro. Without hesitation, Pedro walks past Adelaide, shoves Osvaldo away from Nieves, and warns him to stay away from her, suggesting that he should pursue Adelaide instead. Osvaldo leaves. Pedro then embraces Nieves, leaving Adelaide standing alone. Heartbroken, she quietly walks over to a nearby tree and begins to cry. Osvaldo approaches her once again, claiming he never approved of the way Pedro treated her, but Adelaide tells him to leave because she refuses to fall for his tricks or ever be with him. Small diamond later, Mercedes speaks with Prudencio, who admits that he tried talking to Pedro but Pedro refused to listen. Later that day, Luis and Domenica spend some peaceful time together. The following morning, Bartolo and Rosina head to the plantation to inspect the crops. When they arrive, they are horrified to discover that the entire field has withered and died. Bartolo immediately rushes back to inform Luis. At the estate, Luis is speaking with a little girl when Rosina arrives in tears and tells him about the devastating discovery. Within moments, Prudencio, Bartolo, Luis and the rest of the workers gather at the plantation, standing in stunned silence as they stare at the destroyed crops.